We're looking at a lot of big tech lobbyists coming into the from the Obama era who are now coming into the White House. So if you think that Republicans or conservatives are going to get a fair shake going forward, you can forget about it. It's getting worse. Censorship is getting worse. The president's kicked off Twitter. So many Twitter accounts are gone or removed. He's off Facebook, YouTube, even Parler is not going to be carried by these tech companies. It's scary.
The presidency of Donald J. Trump wasn't supposed to happen. Back in 2016, the same pundits that said the British people wouldn't dare vote against the wishes of our political and cultural elites by voting to leave the European Union, but they did. As they did in the United States of America, the American people voted against the demands of their sneering and contemptible so-called betters in voting for the US president. Now, a lot's happened over that 4-year period. We find ourselves in the extraordinary position where 4 years on, Joe Biden will take over the top job and the US president has been booted off social media platforms after an extraordinary and unjustifiable, it has to be said, violent assault on the Capitol building, the meeting place of the United States Congress and the seat of the legislative branch of the US federal government. I want to know what the legacy of Donald Trump is. I want to know, has Trump changed the Republican Party? I want to know if there's anything in the argument that Donald Trump wasn't fighting on a level playing field in that 2020 election. What should we make of big tech censorship of the democratically elected leader of the free world? And finally, what should we make of the hypocrisy of those who kept silent and endorsed violence last year, suddenly arguing that America now finds itself in the throes of fascism because of a few violent upstarts at the Capitol building? With all of that said, I want to explore those questions with a very good friend of mine, and our last conversation on the US election was watched and enjoyed by well over 100,000 of you, and I'm sure you'll find our conversation well worth your time. If you do, please do consider subscribing to our channel to make sure you don't miss out on any future content. Anyway, without any further ado, I'm delighted to introduce, again, Sarah Elliott, the chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, how are you?
Are you going stir crazy yet?
Yeah, I do have my moments. I love the grocery store. I've never loved the grocery store so much in my entire life.
Now, Sarah, I want to start by discussing what you think Trump's legacy will be. Now, to name but a few of his achievements in that one term, he put through a conservative agenda that was music to both of our ears. Despite you not backing him in 2016 for your reservations that he was a New York liberal that was destined to be a dud, you know, we've seen tax cuts and deregulation efforts to boost jobs, alleviate the burden on businesses and help America grow. He forced the West to wake up to the threat of China. You know, gone are those days, Sarah, of Obama and Biden being able to cozy up to President Xi in the most shockingly naive way imaginable. He has managed to get his picks on the Supreme Court. He's forced to rethink, especially in the EU, that they can expect American taxpayers to pick up the tab for the defence of their realms. And last but certainly not least, he's clearly had an impact through peace agreements that any other president, Sarah, would have won the Nobel Peace Prize for, right?
Right. I mean, actually, we have a president who didn't have any peace agreements and he still won the Nobel Peace Prize. So, you know, Donald Trump's exceeded all expectations. I mean, he came in as the disruptor, as the non-establishment candidate who could be beholden to none because he was a self-made billionaire. And he surprised me with, again, just what you reiterated. And I, as well as, you know, he really, I think, shone exceptionally well on the international stage in the sense that he built up the NATO war chest to the tune of 130 billion and even 400 billion over the next 4 years. He also did not get us engaged in any international conflicts. He didn't expect the British to put up their men and women to serve in new military, foreign interference of any kind, military conflict, combat. And it's to be said that because of this record and also because of the behavior of the left, Okay. Donald Trump doesn't work or operate in a vacuum. He is a response, a reaction to the Democrats and the liberals. And because of the way he's taken on the liberal media and the bias that is out there against him and against the American people and against the deplorables in the red states in the Midwest, he garnered over 12 million new voters in 2020. He got 74 million votes in the election in November. We had the highest turnout in American history. 158 million people voted in this election, and he got 12 million more. And so apparently his message and his record and the fact that he wasn't a Democrat and also wasn't an old school Republican was very appealing to very many people.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, I wonder if you might just reflect on, you sort of hit on it a little bit there. What were the difficult parts of the president's time in office? You know, if you think about the unique challenges that he's faced in the similar way to, as I mentioned, the attacks on our vote for Brexit, he suffered similar attempts to delegitimize his election win. As you said, the deplorables, there were accusations that they didn't know what they were voting for, or that it was dodgy data that swung the election, or that it was accusations that he colluded with Russia that swung the election. And then, of course, he had the impeachment proceedings as well throughout his term in office. Just what were the challenges, and just how vicious was the left's reaction to President Trump?
Oh, gosh. I mean, from day one, they wanted him out. They said even back in November 2016, they were going to impeach him. I mean, for no other reason than winning legitimately the Electoral College. Then they went after his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, to get him removed. And they set him up in a trap, the FBI, which appears to be led perhaps by even Obama himself. Then you have also the spying on the campaign that the FBI did. Then the dodgy dossier from Christopher Steele, a British former spy, about Russia collusion, which cost the American taxpayer $500 million over the course of 2 years, that came up with zilch. I mean, so he was under constant attack. CNN, which is a main news network in the United States, just completely lost any sense of objectivity or professional journalism decorum and went after this Russia collusion every single day. It was the story, and it was hit on the American people. And guess what? It came up to nothing. And then the impeachment, which was about a phone call with the Ukrainian president. And it actually, in the process, brought up the fact that Joe Biden was the corrupt player in all of this, and his son sitting on a natural gas company in Ukraine for no other reason than his father's the vice president. And his father demanded the Ukraine the sack a prosecutor who was looking into corruption into the company. I mean, it is mind-boggling that this didn't get the coverage it deserved, on top of the fact that Joe Biden's son has been a bundler for money from the CCP, even a personal attorney for a CCP member.
That's a Chinese communist, yeah?
Party, yeah. And it was just a complete, utter blackout in the media. He had no one on his side except for, at times, Fox News in 2020, and I would say alternative media outlets. Just in the News, Zero Hedge, Epic Times, The Federalist, National Review did good pieces on him, but there was not a main news network in America that could give objective journalism for over 4 years on this president. And that garnered him a ton of support and endeared him to many conservative and Republicans who did not like his rhetoric, who did not like the way he necessarily behaved, but felt like he had every right to fight back against those accusations. And that's, again, how he reached the 74 million mark.
And yeah, so there was evidence throughout the last 4 years of Trump derangement syndrome, right? Much in the same way that Remain campaigners have just thrown everything at trying to overturn the UK's vote for Brexit. as you say, Trump added 12 million more votes to his count than in 2016, a total of over 74 million in 2020. But we've seen since then, Sarah, Trump and his allies argued that the election was stolen, and 60 court cases and the loss of the 2 Georgia Senate seats too. Was there any, in your eyes, valid argument to the postal fraud arguments and around the idea that Trump wasn't actually fighting a fair fight, thanks to the media and big tech? And as you say, a majority of Americans agree with you, Sarah, that, according to one poll at least, that the media buried the Hunter Biden story to aid his dad's campaign. So was it a fair fight in 2020? Is there any sort of valid argument to be made that it wasn't actually a fair election?
Well, yeah, there isn't definitely an argument to be made. And also talking about social media and Twitter, I mean, his tweets were always tagged with disclaimers that might not be factual or and that sort of thing. Fair fight? No way. No way was it a fair fight. And that is a form of voter interference, if you ask me. The fact that Twitter or social media accounts had to give disinformation tags on the president or, fact checked him throughout the campaign, but never did so on the left. The fact that the media never went after the left on Antifa or even properly reported on the riots, always calling them peaceful protests, and the way they destroyed 75 cities across the United States this summer. I mean, and America knows this. This really irritates them. They know that their democracy is being manipulated, and you see that in the passionate support of the Trump supporters. Do you know that you see that in the way that they have undying loyalty to this man, because he's their fighter in the ring and he's doing it against all the odds and he's doing it for them. Unfortunately, after the election, things did not go the president's way. He was not able to prove his point or convince the American people, and more specifically 60 court cases, that there was legitimate fraud that took votes away from Donald Trump and gave Joe Biden the election. He was not successful in that regard. I was somebody who was giving him the benefit of the doubt in the very beginning and thinking, oh, maybe he knows something. I was waiting and I was watching. Sidney Powell came forward with accusations about Dominion voting system, which, by the way, I think electronic voting system is not good. And I think that should be reformed. I don't think there should be electronic voting systems in the United States. But anyway, and also the mail-in ballots, of course, there was going to be chaos when you have 158 million people voting, and voting by ballots, it absolutely clogged our postal system. We know dead people voted. We know that people voted more than once in some cases. We know that there was not signature verification randomly in Fulton County, Georgia, and the counting stopped. Somebody had pulled a urinal off the wall. It was all these irregularities, but they did not prove that Joe Biden stole the election.
Yeah,
and I'm
so
sorry,
there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough of a. No, yeah, and I think that's so. A lot of people say, Sarah, well, you just look at the way in which it unfolded throughout the night. It did seem that actually, once President Trump won Florida, you thought, well, actually, hang on a minute. He's in with a pretty good chance of pulling off a 2016 here. But then, of course, that happened on Brexit night, Sarah. Once Sunderland went for leave, the Remain campaign, which had thought it had won up until that point, when it was receiving Remain vote after Remain vote, it thought, well, we've won this. And then Sunderland came in and suddenly everyone went, shit, Leave actually stands a pretty good chance here. That's a pretty resounding victory for Leave. And
exactly. Yeah,
it's no different to that, is it, right? There were certainly, I think, cases in which you can say, well, hang on a minute, there's something dodgy's going on here, but nowhere near on a scale large enough to say that the Biden election is completely illegitimate, right?
That's correct. And I feel since the election, the president not only let down his base supporters, but he's let down America. And I feel let down by the president, which is why recently I've come out, especially after the January 6th events. I can no longer support his presidency. He should have been prepared for mail-in ballot fraud in a much better way. He was calling it before the election that there was going to be mail-in chaos, and he was right, and he should have had that slick legal team of lawyers who spend their whole career on voter fraud ready to go and investigate these cases, and he just wasn't. And why didn't Department of Justice set up a special investigation team to go look into it? Perhaps it just didn't happen. He didn't play his cards right, and he started stirring the pot in a very unhealthy way for our democracy, really convincing his diehard supporters who would walk over burning coals for him that, yes, indeed, this was stolen from you, the American people. And there's just not enough proof to that. They had until December 14th to make their case before the Electoral College met, and it just wasn't done. It's not a lot of time. You've got to be ready for these things. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. If there was really systemic voter fraud that turned the election, I want it investigated, and I want the integrity of the voting system to come back. I mean, Americans now on the right don't believe in the democratic system, in the democratic institution. If people on the left in 2016 didn't believe in it, now people on the right, and what kind of country do you have? What kind of free democratic society do you have if you do not believe in the legitimacy of your elections? And Donald Trump has just chipped away big time on that trust by people on the right, and it's not healthy. And look, it culminated in January 6th. It also greatly affected the Georgia Senate runoff seats. And by fighting with the Secretary of State of Georgia and other Republicans there, and demanding that the Senate candidates, endorse his way of thinking that it was a fraudulent election, and that actually the election in Georgia was going to be fraudulent, and it is a rigged election. Guess what? People didn't come out to vote. Republicans didn't come out. Funny how you don't come out to vote when you're told it's going to be a rigged election.
Yeah, I think you're right on postal votes and things like that. I even in the United Kingdom, Sarah, I think there's evidence that it's tampered with. I mean, not enough to massively swing elections, but in an election where a constituency election where a few votes matters, it does matter. And I think even a couple of voter fraud examples are a couple too many. So I do understand those legitimate grievances, but focusing on that point about Georgia being lost, and I think you're right. Why would you bother turning out if your man is telling you that actually it's a fix and there's no point voting, essentially, and that he's going to be president on January 20th anyway? So, why would you bother? And I just want to play a clip then, just to highlight why I'm so scared about the Democrats taking control of the Senate. And after watching it, Sarah, I wonder if you might sort of give your thoughts on what we're going to see, I guess, until the midterms in 2 years' time. If you consider that even the Vice President of the US, Kamala Harris, who uniquely stands at a pretty good chance, I don't mean to be too depressing, but uniquely stands a pretty good chance of becoming president herself, surely I'm quite scared by the fact that she has her pronouns in her bio. The Democrats have swung so far to pandering to the woke hard left that it's almost becoming a joke. So anyway, let's watch this clip and then I'll have you respond to it and give your thoughts on that.
May the Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace. Peace in our families, peace across this land, and dare I ask, O Lord, peace even in this chamber, now and evermore. We ask it in the name of the monotheistic God, Brahma, and God known by many names, by many different faiths. Amen and a woman.
Now, Sarah, the Democrats have so much control over the branches of US government now. What do you think we're in for? Do you think that amen and a women? I thought it was a parody at first. Do you think the establishment class and the sort of pandering to wokery and whackery that Trump was seen as the antidote to are now stronger than ever?
Oh my gosh, what does even a woman mean?
Yeah, I
I mean,
know.
I'm a woman, but I
It
don't know what an a woman
it
is.
comes from Hebrew, right? And it has nothing to do with gender. What are they going to start doing now? Calling the Hebrew Bible the Shebrew Bible? I mean, this is just completely insane. These people have lost their bloody minds.
I mean, we know they're incapable of anything.
Yeah,
So I mean, all calls are off. I mean, we should see it. I mean, who knows what to expect? I mean, maybe they'll talk about different species. I don't know. I mean, this is a post-truth era. You know,
which is
it's
exactly what they
wacky.
accused Trump of.
Oh yeah, I mean, but dude, I mean, a woman. I never. Anyway, it's just so confusing. I just don't recognize our country. I, I don't want to have to use pronouns. Look at me. I'm a woman. Say she.
Mm.
Don't make it hard on yourself. But what does this mean? I mean, what are we going to see? I mean, Trump has sabotaged his legacy. By losing those two Georgia Senate seats, he's put these bozos in charge. I mean, we're going to see more of this nonsense talk, basically. And no one's going to understand what it means. And it not only that, it's going to now unravel his legacy. So
Yeah.
you have a Democratic Senate, and now they're able to undo any kind of piece of tax legislation, right? Because you need both chambers of Congress, to undo tax law. So now they're going to roll back the tax cuts. So everybody in America, you're getting tax hikes, FYI. And also the judges. I mean, he put on 3 very strong judges. He stood next to them, particularly Kavanaugh, when his character was ripped apart in front of the nation on TV by some baseless claims. And that is actually where I became a great Trump supporter, was when he stood with Kavanaugh. But now, not only can they put liberal justices on the court, they have talked about actually expanding the Supreme Court to put any number more, packing it. And they want to remove the legislative filibuster, which means to pass legislation, it will make it much easier for them to pass legislation, basically. So any good that Donald Trump did, and he did do a lot of good over the last 4 years, can be easily undone with the Democratic control of both chambers of Congress. And they're also looking at creating statehood for D.C. and Guam and Puerto Rico, so they can have more liberal left-wing senators in the Senate and Congress members. They're, Medicare for all. They want to make a universal healthcare system in America, which for over 350 million people would be just with state law. It's just disastrous. We can't afford it.
The Equality Act as well. They're talking about putting through an Equality Act, and of course, as well as that, anyone who's in the United States illegally will receive amnesty. Yeah. It's that sort of thing as well, right? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, but they just want to add Democrats to the voting rolls. So they don't care that they have open borders and who comes and goes. Who cares if you're an illegal immigrant and you've committed murder or rape and murder? Here, stay. It's perfectly fine. Here, and we'll give you a house and we'll give you benefits. I mean, it's absurd. There's no respect for the rule of law. And Kamala Harris is very liberal. She has one of the most liberal voting records in the U.S. Senate. And she's going to be dominating that White House because she's positioning for 2024, as you said. And Joe Biden, let's face it, he's not as robust as he used to be. And he kind of just wants to go with the flow. And I think he's just going to rubber stamp everything that comes his way, because fighting it takes a lot of energy. And when you're 78 years old and maybe not corpus mentis all the way, that's the easier thing to do. It's really sad that the president has not shown loyalty to the Republicans by doing a better job of campaigning and being smart post-election, by supporting the democracy, by saying he'd do a peaceful transfer of power after the election was over. He should have definitely conceded when it was clear the Electoral College was not going his way when they certified in December. This whole thing that Mike Pence could overturn the Electoral College is just crazy talk. It's not constitutional. It's not in the Constitution.
It put Mr. Pence Vice President Pence in a very unfair position.
a very unfair position. And look, they had nooses at the Capitol building
Wow.
in chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." There's actually, they say they defend the Constitution, but nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the vice president can override the Electoral College. None at all.
On that point, Sarah, you argue in a piece for Conservative Home that Trump, far from conserving the legacy, as you've just said, we've spoken about that legacy. It's an impressive legacy, a record over 4 years to actually be proud of. He's now, you argue, almost fatally damaged it. I wonder if you might reflect on how you feel about what actually happened at the Capitol building and why you were so upset by President Trump's response leading up to and after it.
Yeah, I mean, I was so shocking. I mean, I was half listening to a speech. I have 2 young children, so I was doing the dinner bedtime routine, and then to watch it live, videos coming into my phone or on the Twitter feed or messages, and then to actually watch it happening, where the people's house, the house of democracy, where actually the senators were certifying the election in a democratic process, was being sabotaged with people carrying American flags, and they were pushing their way in, and there was violence, and then a woman was shot, and we found out she died later along with 5 other people. And then they were wearing crazy things, and it was like I was watching a banana republic. I was like, this is not my country, but these people are a part of my political party, and this is not what Republicans stand for. And then the president didn't say anything forcefully. He didn't make an address to the nation. He didn't call in the National Guard. I thought, what is going on? How dare he let this happen? People were running for cover. Shots were being fired. They were hanging from the balconies. It was just a complete neglect of responsibility and leadership. And these people are diehard loyalists who flew across the country for his rally and have probably done it all throughout the election and have been with him, and you would do anything for this man. And here he's letting them take the fall. They're all going to go to jail. They're all going to spend time, like 10 plus years. They're all going to be paying the price for this. And the president does need to take responsibility for the language and for stirring the pot all these months since the election. It's unacceptable. And I couldn't stand by and not say anything.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make then, Sarah, with that said? And I do agree with you on that point, but what do you think of those smearing all, including yourself, 74 million Trump voters with the acts of what you've described as unjustifiable political violence in DC, especially those that supported Black Lives Matter with the burning, the looting and the violence that took place across America under the banner of Black Lives Matter during 2020. Antifa, for example. What do you make of those trying to smear all 74 plus million people in the United States with the political violence of a small set of people that disrupted and infiltrated the Capitol building?
Yeah, well, it's hypocrisy, I mean, it's absolute. There's a total double standard, and it's infuriating. And that also fuels these people as well, is the fact that, one, they're not taken seriously, but that there's no criticism on the left. And I think you have to be able to call a spade, and you have to call out the wrongdoing on your side as well as calling out the wrongdoing on the other side. So I think, even as hard as it is for Republicans to hear this, what happened on Wednesday was unacceptable and undemocratic and should never happen again. And people lost their lives. Now, the left need to be saying it about themselves as well. And there's been a lot more damage coming from the left in terms of burning businesses, courthouses. I mean, Antifa is still attacking courthouses in Portland, Oregon. They've taken down whole sections of cities in Seattle and Portland. They've taken over precincts, police precincts. They routinely attack police precincts. I mean, you imagine the images that we saw. Remember the images from New York and Wisconsin and Kenosha and, Detroit. It's just really awful in Atlanta. So the left need, and of course the media and big tech, They don't ever hold these people to account. And that is horrible for our democracy. That also undermines our democracy. And one of the reasons Americans don't trust anybody, even on politics to COVID and the pandemic, is because it's clear that the media doesn't do its job and they just rattle off talking points for one side.
Well, let's play a clip just to really hit home that point, Sarah.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
That ain't a riot, what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis. They are strictly principled anti-fascists, and they've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up.
I argue to you tonight, all punches are not equal morally.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
Any reasonable person would say we shouldn't be destroying other people's property, but these are not reasonable times.
But thank goodness for the looters, man.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I don't care that much about statues.
Shouldn't that be done by shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
You're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Do not get it twisted and think that, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible, and where are we, and these savages and all of that. This is how this country was started.
People get mad, and people get sick of it. People are risking COVID to explain to this country that we're fed up.
Most of the major movements in American history have started at the grassroots level and at some point have turned into direct conflict with American government. So remember your history before you judge your present.
Thuggishness is thuggishness wherever it comes from politically, and we should be the first to call it out.
I disagree.
I mean, Sarah, that's just extraordinary to me, isn't it? And my view is that political violence is always wrong, not just when you disagree with the cause. And that isn't a difficult position to understand or to make from where I'm standing. So I do think there are legitimate arguments to be made here that the comparisons and the smears of Trump voters, it's just not the same thing. And these people need to actually be aware of the damage and the seeds of mistrust that they've actually sown thanks to their reporting of the protests, the violent protests that took place last year.
Yeah, I mean, you can't deny when looking at that's not mostly peaceful, that is destructive. And actually, they attacked and looted a lot of minority-owned businesses in their own communities. I don't understand why the left can't condemn that, except that they like stirring the pot. This is how radical the Democratic Party has become. This is not the Tip O'Neill JFK party, even Bill Clinton Democratic Party. These people advocate for, violent protests. And also, Kamala Harris was out there saying right after the Minneapolis that this is going to keep on going and this isn't the last you've seen of it. And she also paid to and encouraged people to give to the bail fund for these rioters and looters when they were arrested in Minneapolis, including 13 Biden staffers also personally gave to bail these people out. So we're not looking at a really reasonable, rational, peaceful group of people coming into the White House and the administration. And in fact, we're looking at a lot of big tech lobbyists coming into from the Obama era who are now coming into the White House. So if you think that Republicans or conservatives are going to get a fair shake going forward, you can forget about it. It's getting worse. Censorship is getting worse. The president's kicked off Twitter. So many Twitter accounts are gone or removed. He's off Facebook, YouTube. Even Parler is not going to be carried by these tech companies. It's scary. It is like Big Brother. I feel like I'm in the Truman Show. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah,
the Truman Show? Everything's okay. Oh, don't worry. Oh, don't worry. Like, no, you're in like this fake world. It's really dystopian, and I never thought in my lifetime I'd be experiencing something like this.
Do you think? Well, where do you think? I guess President Trump will go from here once January 20 comes around?
Well, I think that the Republican Party should no longer be loyal to him because he's not been loyal to them. And he lost the Senate seats and he's behaved despicably. So I used to think that Donald Trump would be a kingmaker and that you'd have to go and kiss the ring, whatever Republican was coming up the line. But now he's so destroyed trust within the Republican ranks, as well as his own legacy and his own records of achievement, that I don't think anybody serious will want to be associated with him. I could see him trying to create his own conservative news network on TV or a platform to challenge Twitter. I could see him something like that. But I think because of January 6th, we're not going to see, he's not going to play the role in the Republican Party that he could have played.
That's an interesting point, because my concern, Sarah, and I don't know if you share these sentiments, my concern is that the Republican Party will simply say, okay, well, we must reject everything that Trump ever stood for. When actually, Sarah, as we've mentioned, he won 74 million votes, right? Everything he stood for, not everything, but his platform was popular. It was a popular platform. And quite a conservative platform as well. And I'm worried that the Republicans will revert to what they were before Trump, which was a party that simply, the only thing it cares about is I guess, free market dogma. The only thing it cares about is it would pander to the Obama administration and do deals with them on immigration, when actually Trump voters and Republican voters were really upset by what was happening as far as immigration's concerned and the lax way in which the border was being treated. And people really, really do not want to see amnesty for those who are there illegally. I think the American people, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Sarah, but I think the American people are broadly supportive of immigration. But you've got to, if you want to be in the United States of America, you've got to go through the legal channels. If you don't, you should leave. And I think that's a view shared by the vast majority of everyday Americans. And I'm a little bit worried that the Republicans will just revert to type and sort of think, well, the way in which we win in 2024 is to take a more sort of centrist approach and sort of go back, try and revert to, I don't know, the Mitt Romney days, when actually we saw that wasn't an appealing prospect to the vast majority of America. So I'm worried that they're going to just revert and say, well, Trump has ruined his legacy, let's scrap it all together, when actually I think that would be a mistake electorally. Do you agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. But I don't think that's going to happen, because actually many of Trump's enduring accomplishments are actually old school Republican ideals, such as tax cuts, deregulation, conservative Supreme Court justices, and also on the federal and appellate level too. So I think those things are staunchly Reagan conservative values that we've tried to maintain since those days. And obviously the Trump tax reform bill did show that it grew the American economy exponentially. I think it's a different coalition now. I mean, Trump's brought a lot of new people into the party. He's increased in every demographic: Hispanics, Blacks, male and female, women, rural, uneducated white women. Except the only area that he didn't expand in were the suburbanites and actually white males. But he really has brought diversity to the Republican Party. So it's up for the Republicans to keep together this unique coalition without him in the picture. And that's going to be the challenge, because it's very working class now, the base. The base is also very loyal to Trump. So it's going to take a person with a special background, special skills. But the issues that are clearly now should not be abandoned by the Republican Party is immigration, strong borders. And you're absolutely right that we're not anti-immigrant at all, and we're all from immigrants. All Americans it's an immigrant nation, but you have to do it fair, legal and fair. It has to be part of the legal process. You just can't walk in and expect to become an American. You have to apply. I think that's fair. And then
being an American is a privilege, right?
Yes. I mean, when I'm here living in the UK, I had to do it the legal process. I couldn't just assume I could come over and expect to not go through the channels to certify myself and make myself legal. I'd expect that from any country.
Yeah, if you don't have a respect for the country's laws, then, what are you actually going to offer to the country? That would be my concern.
Yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. Exactly right.
It's as fundamental as that.
Yeah, you need to become an American.
Yeah. How do you think then, Sarah, that the Republican Party should go about reclaiming the moral high ground? And what I mean by that is everything that you've mentioned. A lot of Trump supporters are quite upset that the moral high ground has been ceded because and I'm one of them, a Trump supporter from, obviously, the United Kingdom, but a Trump supporter who said it won't be Republicans that cause the White House to have to put up barricades. It won't be the Republicans who cause shops to have to barricade themselves from being firebombed and all the rest of it. It won't be Republicans that attack the police and go on these mass demonstrations. Now, that hasn't happened on anywhere near the same scale it did for the Black Lives Matter movement last year. But these few violent upstarts have sort of, and Trump's tacit endorsement of that violent upstart movement. And how do Republicans then rebuild that trust of the moral high ground and actually say, we are the party of law and order. We are the party that, where there is electoral fraud, we want to see it stamped out, but we are the party that respects democracy. We aren't like Britain's Remain campaigners. We are going to stand up and respect our institutions. Attacks on the Capitol building are absolutely disgusting. Attacks on police officers are absolutely unjustifiable. Attacks on your democracy, basically, are completely out of order and not in the Republican tradition. How do you think you recapture that moral high ground?
Well, you have to denounce it right away, which is why I came out when I did. Listen, it doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things what I say, but I am the chair of Republicans Overseas UK. But the likes of, Mick Mulvaney, Nikki Haley, several other, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Tom Cotton, Dan Crenshaw. These are all future leaders and current leaders of our party. And you have to just nip it in the bud. But the problem is it's convincing Trump's base that they were led astray by their leader and that he left them to hang out to dry and to take on the consequences without, stopping them, really. And also that this was a legitimate election, that yes, there were elements of fraud, as most elections provide, but it wasn't in such numbers as to steal it from President Trump. So leaders, people like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, who were part of the rally down on Wednesday, January 6th, and who said that they were going to challenge the Electoral College. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility on their heads because they also led people down the river thinking that, again, this wasn't a legitimate election. And so I think we just need more people to come out and talk about it, but also we're going to have to talk about what Republicans stand for and not to lose the working class and not to change the subject on trade. These people feel like free trade with China has devastated their communities and their jobs, and it's true.
I totally agree.
And so the Republicans can't go back to that. At least they cannot not recognize the pain that these people are going through, and they have to provide solutions to bringing back manufacturing to these areas, or at least providing some kind of a new economy for them that they can participate in. But this idea that it's free trade 100% of the time is not going to work with this new Republican coalition, and that maybe trade tariffs do work, especially in regards to China. And that's a new way of thinking. And that's why we're not going back to the Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's Republicans, we're not going back to them. He lost. He lost it for Republicans. Americans don't like losers. We don't go back to people who lose. And so his era is done, but we are going to be looking to the future. And I think some of the names I just mentioned, like Ben Sasse and Tom Cotton.
Who's your favorite out of the names that you've just mentioned?
Actually,
who do you want to see on the ticket in 2024, basically, if you can think that? You know, I don't want you to look in your crystal ball, but if you could choose.
Yeah, well, as someone I didn't mention, who I actually think could actually be a good bridge from the old school Republicans to the Trump base, is Mike Pompeo. He's done a fantastic job as Secretary of State. He's been leading the president's efforts around the world.
On Hong Kong, on China, on everything. He's been fantastic.
China, Iran, Russia, religious liberty. It's been amazing to watch. And think about the Abraham Accords as well, and Israel, and moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And so I think he gets the base likes him. The base doesn't think he's a traitor of any kind. The base will think I'm a traitor because I don't stand for the president anymore. But Pompeo is a great bridge. Nikki Haley has a future. People are talking about Kristi Noem of South Dakota, she's a governor there. There's, there are 18 new women freshman legislatures coming into the U.S. House. I mean, and one of them was the first female to graduate from the Citadel, Nancy Mace of South Carolina. I mean, there's exciting people coming up.
Speaking of the House then, Sarah, are you optimistic that in 2 years' time the Republicans actually do stand a chance of taking the House, and actually that that rebuilding of the Republican movement all isn't lost, and that actually Republicans have got quite a lot to be optimistic for? Because as we mentioned earlier, what we're dealing with here is the most radical left Democratic administration that the country has ever seen.
Yes. And we have this is what's also great about the left too, which should give Republicans some hope. They overstep their bounds. They always go too far, and the squad will, of course, say and do stupid things. So we should all, be excited about that and look forward to that. And we'll take advantage. But I think, with the new leadership, 2 years is not far away. We're only 7 seats away from taking back the House right now. I mean, the elections were not bad for Republicans across the board. They also control most of the state legislatures in the country, and that will decide redistricting for the congressional districts after the 2020 census. So there's a lot to be optimistic about, especially the diversity that has come into the Republican Party, mainly because a lot of the minorities are just fed up with the Democrats and the way they've let their cities burn and
taken for granted.
Yes. So again, we do have a new coalition that needs a new leader, but people like myself, lifelong Republicans, have always said, like, we like what the president is doing. We just don't like how he's delivering the message. And so we just need a new messenger. And I'm positive that these ideas that have proved so popular with the country will continue, and the radical socialist agenda of the Democrats will push people more into our tent, as well as the ridiculous identity politics that they play, like the A-woman business. The more of that they do, the more they're going to look to the Republicans. But I think also the messenger that we get will also have to be slightly an offensive conservative. And what I mean by that is that goes on the offensive, does not just take the heat of the biased media or the Democrats and not say anything in return. Somebody who actually pushes back. And that's what
So you need a fighter in the same way that Trump was, right? You say what you want about him, but that man was a fighter, is a fighter.
He's a fighter. And I like seeing him in the ring when he went up against my enemies. And that's how a lot of people felt. And that's how he got 74
So that's what the Republican Party needs again, yeah.
Yes, but someone who fights differently.
Yeah, yeah. Now, finally, Sarah, we've covered quite a lot of ground. I wonder, we sort of touched on this, but we didn't really, go into the real meat of the issue. I wonder if you might reflect on what you reckon the big tech censorship of Donald J. Trump's online accounts and even his stores will mean for unity in the US. My view is that the vast majority of the 74 point whatever million Trump voters are decent and law-abiding, and many of them reckon that their man wasn't fighting on a level playing field in 2020, and I'm afraid that censoring tech billionaires have done precious little, the square root of bugger all in fact, to disabuse them of such notions. At the time of recording this conversation, Sarah, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Spotify, Snapchat, Instagram, Shopify, Reddit, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, and Pinterest have all banned or restricted the, let's not forget, still democratically elected president of the United States of America. What do you think of all of this, and just how serious is this stuff getting?
It's really serious. We've never seen anything like this before. This is exactly what conservatives and Republicans were saying would happen if a Democrat got elected. They feel emboldened because the tech companies feel emboldened because they know that their Section 230 status will not be rescinded. They will still be treated as a platform and not a publisher, and they need to be treated as publishers, in my view, because they're acting as publishers. This is just proving every conservative's point, and this is only pushing us further and further into our own trenches. And Twitter is supposed to be a platform of dialogue, and now you're literally silencing the dialogue and discussion, and how can bridges be made? This is not a good thing. And it started with silencing the Hunter Biden story right before the election. And it's despicable. It will only lead to conservatives and Republicans finding other avenues to voice their opinion. It's not going to silence them. They're not going anywhere. And they still buy products, and they're still in the marketplace, and they will still vote come election day. So I don't know what the big tech companies are trying to achieve by doing this, but I think they could be shooting themselves in their foot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I said that was my final question, but I wonder if to end, because I think we've been quite pessimistic, apart from that note of optimism on the future of the Republican Party. Are you optimistic for the future of America in general? Because a few people, Sarah, have said America is now a failed state. That this just proves everything that's happened recently just proves that the United States of America is a busted flush, and that the leader of the free world ain't what it used to be. I wonder if, as an American, one, how does that make you feel when people say that sort of thing? And secondly, are you optimistic that America's fortunes and Americans' future is actually going to be better, and that actually the Democrats' time in office will be pretty short-lived?
Yeah, how does it make me feel? Well, it makes me feel, sad. I would much rather, disappointed. I would much rather people really like what's happening in America. But to me, it also shows a bit of ignorance in terms of their American history, because Americans, we're a very mercurial, passionate people, in the sense our history goes up and down. I mean, the worst part of our history was the American Civil War, and people thought it was done then. And we've rebounded and had many more chapters in our history since. So I think that this is just just a period of our history we have to get through, and we have to heal. We have to. This is not the last chapter. We still have a lot more to come. And the reason I say that is because the American people are an amazing people. We're tough. We're relentless. We're passionate. We're ideologues. We're entrepreneurs and thrivers and risk takers, and we believe the American dream still exists. We're still innovative. We run the 100th mile. We never let anything stop us. And I think, just don't underestimate America. Mm-hmm. And we're still one of the biggest economies in the world, if not the biggest. And we have the biggest and most sophisticated military as well. So people still need to respect us. And I just think this is just a low point for us. But we will come back, and we'll come back stronger because of the American people. And we like to reinvent ourselves as well.
Well, that's a good note to end on. Sarah Elliott, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Now, I'm sure you'll be absolutely desperate to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to make sure that you don't miss out on any future content. You can follow Sarah on Twitter. I'll put the link to her Twitter account in the description to this video. And please, 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 if you can support us, our GoFundMe page is in the link in the description too. I'll see you next time. Reasoned relies upon grassroots donations from people like yourself that want us to continue producing our high quality, free thinking content. So please do consider clicking the link and donating, no matter how big, no matter how small, because it really does ensure that we can keep on keeping on.